Welcome to a new video made with Cables. Today we are continuing our work around data visualization, and I would like to specifically talk about how to use this EChart library that we already talked about in the previous video in Cables. And so if you come from the data visualization background, you may be wondering how to use these kinds of tools inside of Cables, which is mostly WebGL based. So it's not that easy sometimes to bridge the two words between the SVG canvas 2D world and the 3D world. And fortunately, I've come up with I created a node in Cables so that you can use ECharts very easily. I think it's like 1 minute just to drag and drop stuff. So let's dig in and see for yourself. So first thing, we need to go to our Cables editor, right? So if you, depending on when you watch this video, the ECharts node may be live or maybe still in the dev version of Cables. So if you go here on top, you notice that it's just you prefix the URL with dev.cables.gl, and you basically have access to the node itself, the ECharts node. All right. So let's dig in. As always, when we start Cables or Cables patch, we need to put a main loop. So I'm gonna put the main loop, which triggers everything basically and sets the canvas. Just to make sure that it works, I always like to put a clear color node to just change the background color, right, like this. But don't forget to save, Control S or Command S on Mac, right? So we are in our Cables editor. Now we need to basically find the chart to display. So if you recall, the ECharts library works by basically describing what you want instead of coding what you want. Let me restate that. So we go here on the Apache, echartsapache.org. We have all these kinds of examples. And the cool thing is that you can basically drag and drop any of these examples right away in Cables and it will just work. So let me tell you why. When you go on the chart, let's take maybe a bar chart, this guy here. You see that, okay, you have this kind of animation, you have the bars, you have animation, like the bar rose gradually. And you see that the only code, it's not actually a code here, but just the description file that was used to create this chart is basically described here on the left side. It's a valid JavaScript object, which can be serialized in a JSON form. So as you can see, we have two axes, right? Here with the days of the week, and here with just a number. So we know that, okay, this is a type of category. We have the data for the labels of this x-axis. The y-axis, we know it's just the value itself. And here in the series, we basically describe how we want to render our data. So we want to render them as bar. So, okay, it's going to be a bar chart. Here is the array that contains the data point. Okay, we want to show the background and we want to stylize the background with this color, for instance, right? So if I put this to false, you see automatically I just removed the background. So this is all we need to basically describe a chart. And this is all we need to basically copy paste in Cables or create this kind of interactive object so we can change the parameters in real time and the chart will update in our Cables patch. So I made one for you. I already prepared a patch so that we have a cool looking background. So first, as I said, we need to copy the JSON. So how do we put JSON in Cables? Well, maybe you recall this node. It's called string editor. And basically what it does, it tells you, okay, I want to have a JSON file. And when you can edit, you open this editor here, and on the left side, you basically can type any valid JSON object. So let me grab my chart options here. Copy, pasting it. And so far, so nothing, of course. So you see we have the highlight, all the syntactic color is done already for us because we basically said in Cables, okay, this is going to be a JSON file. Now we have this is just a string so far. So we need to basically transform this string into a valid JavaScript object. And to do so, we have another node called Parse object. So I'm gonna, lay down a new node, parse object, which says parse the string to a JSON object. I connect the two. Maybe I put them here. Just checking if you see everything on the frame. Okay, I have this parse object, and so we have this JSON string, and it tells me, okay, this is a valid JSON file, so I know that there's no errors there. And I can inspect it like this, so which is just the same file but reformatted. Okay, so now here the output is not a string anymore, it's an object. And and we're gonna use this object to basically set our chart. So how do we do that? Well, there is a very simple node, which is called the ECharts node. So just type the ECharts and you basically have it. So let's go through all the options of this node. You notice first, and when you put it down, like the canvas becomes white. And the reason is that it's actually overlaying on top of the regular, you see, Cables canvas, like a new node, the new div node, right? With this particular width and height. And you can specify a parent object. So maybe this is a sub object of some other div that you put in the DOM. You can put an ID. And so how do you make sure that the chart is responsive? As you can see, when I resize my canvas now, the chart is always on the top left corner. So one thing that we could do is grab the width and height from the main loop, so that we make sure that the chart is always resized at the correct like screen size, right? So if you are in mobile phone, everything is gonna scale accordingly. So okay, that's the first thing. So let me just check. If I take this and I drag it, as you can see, it's being resized, right? Once my drag end event fires. So okay, I'm here. Now I have the chart option, which is the most important option, right? This is the most important port of this op, because it tells us how to where to connect the files that we created, like the whole chart description here, to this node. So let me just connect this, and voila, that's it. That's done. Automatically, you have a chart, and it could be any chart that you could, any example that you take from here. You can copy paste it, create your own, you put it there, and automatically you have this resized, like perfectly pixel perfect chart. As you can see here, maybe we can go over what I did. We have this here, this property says emphasis. So when I put my mouse over one of the bars, I'm focusing on the bar itself, and I'm changing the item color to red. Basically, this is what happens there, right? We have a legend, we have a title, we have the data, the different like kind of sales for shirts and pants and heels, okay? And here is the value, like the values for each individual column. So far so good. We have our chart, and okay, what can we do now? Maybe it would be nice if we could, make the data move in real time, so that it will respond to events, and try to see how we could basically combine arrays or data that we do in Cables and have them update the values here in real time. So just before we do that, let me go through the rest of the options. Here you have a theme, right? So you can change automatically the theme, or you can put a custom theme object, and we'll go through that after. So basically, it's another big JSON file that describes how each chart should color the chart. So the line, the bars, the background, everything, so that we can have one coherent style for all your charts in the same page, basically. And because it's a JSON object, it's pretty cool, because you can also stream it from the web and basically, change in real time how charts look. So if you want to have like kind of dynamic dashboard, and we have part of the data which is processed on the server, it could be also nice to have a very responsive front end. You don't need to touch it. You just stream the new theme or custom, like the options of the chart, and it will change accordingly. We also have the style, or you can basically set the CSS properties of this DOM element, right? And you see that by default the background is white. This is why we saw a white square at the beginning. And you can just check whether or not the chart is visible, right? So you can play with it and let me have a slider, or maybe on hover somewhere up the chart pops in. It's up to you. The outputs are what? Are the DOM element itself, the ECharts instance, which is needed for grabbing events, and we'll go through that in a few seconds, and just a trigger that tells you if the theme has changed. So when you basically change the theme, you can also reload and rebind the events. We're going to see that. But first, as I said, let's try to update the data dynamically, right? So if we want to update the data, what we need is some kind of we could just use a timer, right, to make sure that we have randomly trigger new values, and these values are being set basically in this object. So if we go back here, remember that these are the values that basically drives the bars. So if I were to change these values automatically, or with a trigger or with a timer or anything, in theory, everything will move accordingly and using ECharts smooth animation. So the only thing that we really need to do is to basically target this property inside of the series key. So as you notice, this is an array. So it's series 0 data, and change the values here. And in theory, everything should move. Let me just do it by hand. If I put this at 80 and I'm saving that, check the bar, it moved. So we need to find a nice way to automate this. So what we could do is first, generate random values to make sure that that they change. So how should we do that? Well, I think the simplest thing would be to just use maybe a trigger limiter. So you know that this main loop is being refreshed by basically from your screen rate. So it's usually 60 hertz, 60 times per second. So what we could do is put a trigger limiter, which basically says trigger what comes below this op once every, here it's 300 milliseconds, but we could put, I don't know, 2 seconds, right? So once every 2 seconds, you trigger what's underneath here. And you can see that with the flow mode, as we're going to see in the few seconds. Yeah, I can do that. It's actually better. Right. Okay, so we're here. And I hope that you can see well. Yeah, okay. So let me push this aside. Now, okay, next. Now that we have this, maybe we need to generate some random values, right? So something that would be triggered by this trigger limiter. So there's another op called trigger random trigger number, which basically says on trigger, so here once every 2 seconds, you would basically spit out a new number. And why do we need, if we need several numbers, not only one. The trick here would be to use this random number as the seed for the random array generator. So if you're not familiar with the seed, it's basically a number that resets how we generate random numbers on the computer, because nothing is really random. So if you have the same seed, the order of the numbers will come up would always be the same. So let's say your random numbers start with 0, 3, and 5. If the seed is the same, it would always start with 0, 3, and 5. So if we want to reload the patch and make sure that there's always new numbers that are being generated, we can play with how the seed works, and if we change the seed, the numbers will change as well. So here that the min and max is between 0 and 1, and as you can see, every 2 seconds there's a new number being generated between 0 and 1, and we can just use that as a way to trigger our random array. So random array. So there's several modes here. Random array, number of values that we need. We need as many values as we have here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 values. We put 6. Only need one value. Not this is just a simple array. It's not like an array 2, 3, or 4 that we use for points in space, for instance. And as you can see here, we have this random scene, which is by default put at 0. Then we can also specify the minimum and maximum value. So here we're between 0 and 100. So let's put maybe 1 so that we have a minimum value, and 99. Okay. We connect this to the random seed, which is the third value here. And in theory, the random thing is changing, and the output, so I can check the output here. And if I refresh, right? Every 2 seconds, I have a new set of value, and we're gonna use those values to basically update the parse object. Let me save that. Yeah, you can still see me. So let me maybe put this below like this. Move it on the side. So now what would be cool to do is to update this object, right? So there's several ops to do that. I think the best one that I created was actually faster. So you can set in nested objects and nested array. It's called ObjectSetAnyByPath. This one. Right, and you will notice, and this op will be also released with the ECharts library. Otherwise, you can always go to my profile and get it. It's actually the code comes from the not _JS, but the a very famous JavaScript library, which I forgot, Lodash. Sorry, you see here, and I basically wrapped this Lodash library here. You see, it's quite big. So that we have this kind of nested object property, which is very handy in this particular case. So you will notice that we have first, it asks for the base object, which would be the output of this, of our ECharts object. Then the second part is the path, which key we want to update. And then we have the white port, which is very rare in cables. This just symbolizes any value. So it could be a number, it could be a string, it could be an array. JavaScript doesn't really care. It's a weakly typed programming language, so you can, have different kind of inputs and change them over time. It doesn't matter for JavaScript, and it will basically update this object. And the last value is whether you want to copy the object, so you don't want to change the original one. So you make a copy and then you update it. So first we need to type the key, and that we know that from the string editor here that the key is, so the base object, series data, but series on the value 0, because in series, why is it an array of series? Because you can have on the same chart several graphics at once. Let's say a bar chart and on top of it a line chart. So you would have basically 2 series here after that. Here we only have 1. So I can just set it here and type series. I can use this shorthand syntax, just .0 to only target the first value of the array. And data, right? This is the key that we need to update. Then we need to copy basically the array here. So it's a bit weird, right? It's bluish to white. And now we need to set the object. So I'm gonna put this here and copy. And just to make sure, let's just inspect our object. As you can see, the data has changed. If I update it, it's changing again, right? So basically it works. We can also, if you don't want to have like we can round the values, right? If we put integer here, the value will be a bit cleaner on the output. Let's just inspect this again. Yeah, like this. So now I can just disconnect this guy and put it there. And you will see that automatically every 2 seconds, the values are updated. It's that easy. It's really simple to do. Imagine the power of cables now, because this I can put on the web. I can create a GitHub page. So you have in just like one ECharts node, you can create any kind of interactive visualization and put it online very easily, just to be hosted for you. Now, more advanced user may ask, okay, how do I get the events? Maybe I want to do something when I click on the bar, I want to trigger something else in my patch, right? And this is a valid question. So there's another node, another ECharts node that we can use, which is called the ECharts event. ECharts event. What it needs first is the instance, right? To connect it to the ECharts. But before that, let's see which event we would like to trigger. So we have several events in ECharts. We can just look at the documentation. I think for this example patch, I will just use the click event, which is the simplest one, I would say. So the name of the event is called click. And basically that's it. You can have this is more the query string is if you want to target something more advanced, like click only on the first value of this series. So you can be very very precise on the way you want to target and add or remove events from the chart. Notice that we have this refresh event binding because we to make sure that we're not setting three different call to click event. Automatically the nodes try to to remove the event and rebind them, but sometimes to make sure that everything works, you need to rebind it by hand. But in most cases, if you do this beforehand and you connect it, it should work. So now I've linked the InChart instance to my event. So in theory, my event is okay. And actually the node tells you that in the output. Does it need rebinding? No, it's all good, right? And now if I click, you see that it changed. The object was null at the beginning because nothing was triggered. Now that I clicked, I basically have all the values that comes from the event, on the click event on ECharts. So it gives you, for instance, it gives us the position where I click, the mouse wheel delta, the type of the event, the data value at that time, where it was triggered was the first bar. So 0 is the first one. So the index is 1, but it's the second bar. Which series and so forth. So from that you can parse the object. It's already parsed, but play with the object, take some of the values and basically do anything you want in Cables. So just to do that, maybe we could have a small text, and when I click, update the text, right? So to do that, this is what I would do, checking that you see me on the screen. I would just use a event counter. I'm not sure. Event, I think it's trigger counter, trigger counter, right? Counts how often the port was triggered. So here I know that when I click, basically this is going to trigger. I can just connect it here, and if I click, you see that this gets triggered. So from there I can just use the value and basically set a div element. For instance, I could put a 3D text mesh, but because the chart is overlaying the whole canvas, maybe it's just easier to have a div element. Div element, okay. You see hello div, it's here, it's there. So maybe I can just change the style and put it on the right. So here I'm just writing CSS, right? I don't know, 10 pixels, font size, I don't know, 30 pixel, color red. Okay, now hello div is there, right? It's quite visible. So now we just need to basically convert this number to a string and set it there. And notice that something that I didn't know before, this could be any valid HTML. So it's not it says text here, but it's not only text. You could basically do that. You could do span, write HTML stuff here, and then use the CSS up to restyle it. So what I mean, the CSS here, the style is inline, but you can also put a CSS up, right? And trigger, just instead of having this style here, copy the style, remove it, put a class like status, whatever. Here, go to the CSS class and put status. Right, and here we have the span, and we can, status span, color red. Should it? Yes, you see. So you can use what you regularly do in HTML, JavaScript, CSS dev, but instead of having to put the style inline, I just put a class here, and notice that you can have several other. You can compose. You can basically create a big string with all the different HTML elements, a bit like you would do with React, for instance, right? When you compose blocks, compose elements, and set that as the div, and just style everything with the CSS node there. So I have this, and so how do you transform this number to a text? Well, you can just do number to string, number to string. Convert a number to string. Okay. 9. And now I don't need to, okay, just can remove the span, just connect it there right away, and it should, and just edit the CSS again. It's there. Color red. Remove that. And here, now, let's close everything. As you can see, when I click, everything gets updated. Let's save. So here you have it. Another way of grabbing some of the events of ECharts and updating the code. Now, there's a last thing I want to cover, a more advanced use case for ECharts. So remember before I told you, maybe you can customize the theme itself. So I want to show you that, and also I want to show you how you can basically have an interactive with like code your custom your options, the ECharts options yourself, so that you can have special handlers or a special way of rendering some of the colors. Because here it seems like everything is static, right? You need to define, you just describe what you want here, but it's just a valid JSON object. This is not an interactive. You cannot code JavaScript code in it. Yet in ECharts you can do this. So to do that, first let me show you how to customize the theme. So let me check. So you can go there on the example, EChart examples, and I think in the here in the resources you can have theme builder. This guy, for instance. Yeah, you have and automatically when you download, this will give you a JSON file, that you can copy and paste. So maybe I can just copy it there. Go on my ECharts patch. Lay down a string editor again, JSON, edit, paste, and once again do another parse object to transform this to a valid JavaScript object, and use that as the custom theme object. And you see automatically the whole chart was reloaded, so it goes back to 0. I'm going to save everything. And everything has been rebound, the event was rebound, everything worked. And I just changed the theme like this. Now the last use case would be the advanced chart, where you, instead of having just a JSON file, you basically have a valid object with sub-functions, in arbitrary JavaScript. So to do that, we need to introduce the custom op. The custom op is actually very similar to what you do here when you want to create your code a new op. When you put this here, this op is gonna be shared with all your patches. If you do a custom op, it's only local to this patch. So maybe you don't want to pollute your global namespace with just a chart like this, because it's very specific to your project. So in this case, it would make more sense to have this custom op there. And first thing you notice, so if you go on the custom ops page here, you see that you have edit for the code, and you can also load a library. So you can drag and drop any JavaScript library that comes from the CDN, for instance. You can also automatically load the libraries that Cables have for you. So you go here, and you have core libs and optional libs such as ML5, machine learning, D3, ECharts, which are already loaded for you. These are the libraries that Cables include for you, but you can load any arbitrary library as well. So we have this custom op, and when we edit there, we basically open a new window, and it tells you, okay, go to the documentation to learn basically how to code an op, which is pretty simple. You can always get inspired by how other ops were made. When you click on an op, you can go on here on the burger menu, view op code, and you can see, okay, to have a trigger, I basically need to put this down, op.inTrigger for in trigger and out value, out trigger, to basically create a out port. So it's quite simple to learn the API of the node. It's basically just int and out, and bind the event, what happens when a new value comes in the port, right? So let me copy paste what I already did for this interactive EChart stuff. I'm gonna copy, paste this here. And yeah, so basically, this I don't need, this I don't need as well. Right, so I saved it, and as you can see, it almost looks similar to what we have before. We have the chart, the options, the title, the legend, but check it out. Here in the series, now we basically call the EChart, we create a new JavaScript object. So this is not only a JSON file anymore, this is a very valid JavaScript object when it's going to be parsed. And now we can call it and have sub functions and everything. And we use that as a way, and we trigger, we set the ECharts options with this new node now. So here it's just gonna create linear gradients. This comes from the basic ECharts examples, by the way. So I have this custom up now, and the only thing that I can do is just to maybe you know, disconnect this guy. Put this instead. And check it out. We have a linear gradient that comes from that is drawn by the real JavaScript code, and not only the JSON file. And you have another way of interacting with the chart, where you have this X and Y, you know, dotted lines to select, and the area. So this is an area curve chart, right, or stacked area chart. And now, okay, the click event is not really the same as before. So sometimes you can just rebind and reload the patch to make sure that it works, but I'm not really sure that the click event is valid here in this particular chart. So this will not work. But just to show you how easy it was just to have this custom chart and, you know, being able to switch them on the fly. So here you have it. I think you have a good overview of how to use ECharts in your patch. And yeah, if you have any questions, I will try to, yeah, the ECharts node will soon be available in the main Cables version. In the meantime, you can use the one on the dev Cables and the dev version. And yeah, hopefully you have a better understanding of how it works, of Cables and of ECharts itself. And yeah, stay tuned for more content. If you like this video, you know what to do. You can like, you can subscribe, you can write to me also on Twitter, or email if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them. And if you have comments, please put them below in the YouTube section. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.